So welcome to the breakout room number 10, if I'm not wrong. We essentially have nothing on the agenda, so let's kill this meeting quickly. There were discussions, so let's get to the only main point, which is that there were discussions of moving the withdrawals to the payload so that we can process withdrawals on the payload and we don't change anything. But there's a problem. So the withdrawals are, of course, they're deterministic on the beacon state. However, if we do block auctions, then withdrawals being part of the block hash of the payload, then the withdrawals should be that will be included in the payload would be deterministic on the beacon on the pre-state of the beacon block. The beacon block would commit the hash of the payload. Now, what happens if between the payload being committed with this withdrawals for the pre-state of the block, and by the time that we're actually processing the withdrawals, the expected withdrawals on the beacon state are different. This can happen, for example, if the beacon block penalized or slashed one of the validators was withdrawing in that very same block. So this seems that for block auctions, this is a problem that is very awkward to solve, because either we make withdrawals being deterministic on the pre-state of the payload, in which case you cannot commit the hash to the payload itself, or we do slot auctions. And I don't see any clean way out of this. So my suggestion would be just to keep the spec as it is because it works. I hope that the explanation was clear on what the situation is. I don't know if there's any comments.
Yeah, I mean, not against what you said. I'm just trying to understand the scenario, but I suppose I'm just trying to follow the dependencies. Sorry, but
the scenario is actually very simple. You don't need to slash or anything like this. So the scenario is this: we are about to propose a block. We call for bids. We get a bid from a proposer. The proposer has already built the block, right? So this proposer includes some withdrawals. Let's say 16 withdrawals.
No, these are what kind of withdrawal? Like we're not talking about withdrawal requests. We're just talking about.
Yeah, this has nothing to do with requests. So let's say that these are partial withdrawals of the next 16 validators.
I want to be clear on what you were saying. I want to be clear on what you were saying.
Yeah. Okay. So let's suppose that these are partial withdrawals.
Okay, that's what I mean. So when you say includes withdrawals, you mean including partial withdrawals, like withdrawals that were made as transactions?
No, no. These are withdrawals that were paid in the payload to the corresponding withdrawal address, the ones that are happening right now before Electro. The excedent on top of the 32 ETH that they deposited.
Right. Okay, but it basically what I'm saying is it has nothing to do with the transactions that were included in the block.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're just
these are the special operations in the block.
Oh, the special like the ones introduced in Electra?
The ones introduced in Capella.
Okay. That's what you mean by special operated. Yeah, I'm just trying to get clear on what the. Okay. So nothing to do with the transactions, just with regular withdrawals. Okay, and then what's the scenario?
So the scenario is that, well, these withdrawals are there. They are in this payload would actually credit ETH on the execution layer to the withdrawal address of, say, validator 1. And now the beacon block, right? Yep. That includes this payload. Exactly that validator 1 was a validator, and it gets penalized. The balance during that block of that validator changes. Okay. For example, the validator itself is the proposer.
Sure.
Okay? So the balance of that validator can change. So now when you call process withdrawals, if we want to keep the process withdrawal just as vanilla as it is, process withdrawals would get the expected withdrawals from the beacon state at the current moment.
Mm-hmm.
And this expected withdrawals is now no longer the pre-state of the beacon block, it's the post-state of the beacon block.
I see.
And it might be different than the withdrawals that actually were included in the payload.
Right, making the payload invalid.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then, I mean, then that just causes a missed block, but the point is that basically the proposed, like, either the builder would have to have some extra logic to make sure that this is not going to happen, or
I think it's impossible, right? Because or we change the logic on processing withdrawals, but I think it's just impossible to solve with committing the withdrawals to the block hash. A solution would be to not include the withdrawals in the block hash, but I think this breaks sync.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, so I think we can revisit this conversation if we move to slot auctions, because this is not a problem in slot auctions. We can make the withdrawals being just the pre-state of the payload into slot auctions without any problem.
Right, but we were leaning towards block because of that other presentation 2 weeks ago, or at least that was
Julian sort of like killed the topic. So it's not really clear. That there are, I don't know if Francesco's here, because doesn't seem to be here. So Francesco is working on an alternative approach to ePBS, which is promising, and we might not have these problems in Francesco's approach, but I don't know. It's just too early to think about this. So my suggestion would be, let's try to keep implementations as they are now.
Oh, I see. I see why the builder. Okay, yeah, you're sorry. That was still churning in my head, but the builder can't prevent this because they don't have control over what the proposer does.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, that's essentially all that it is. Regarding the spec, we're in the same spot. I haven't rebased yet the testing PR on top of Lucas's PR. I just rebased Prism's implementation on top of Lucas's PR, the one that removes the requests out of the payload and puts it in the beacon block body. So on ePBS, they're going to be on the payload envelope, and this was a nightmare for Prism. But I think we are the most advanced in the implementation, so probably this is not that much of a problem for you guys. But if you are implementing, then this might be a problem for you as well. For us, that rebase was a nightmare.
Which rebase? Sorry.
Well, we had already implemented a bunch of the logic of using the requests being in the payload.
Are you talking about? That's all.
Yeah, and then you need to remove them from the payload and put them in the payload envelope, and that was
No,
all right.
I missed which PR you were talking about.
Oh, so this is Lucas's PR. Let me just find it. I think it's 38 something, 385. What is it? 3875 perhaps. Yeah, so it's 3875 in the spec repo here. I posted the link there.
Okay, cool, thanks. And this, oh, the thing we were talking about on ACD yesterday.
No, so that's another thing, which is to remove when we call get payload, the engine API would bring this request would be separated, so that the CL needs to interpret this and put them in the pico block body. So it's that we haven't even changed. We need to see how it works, and we need to come. We need to make the engine API changes, perhaps depending on what comes out of that EIP, we will need to or not need to add engine API changes. I suspect that we do not require any engine API changes.
That's nice.
Besides the ones that you already noticed that are by range.
Yeah. Where are people on their implementations of the CIP? Like, basically, I'm pretty much, I mean, barring these changes, but I'm pretty much done with like the beacon chain changes. But I got to do all the fork choice still.
We have most of the beacon chain changes, not all, because anything that requires fork choice we haven't implemented, and we haven't implemented essentially anything on fork choice. We have the P2P validations, so we have all the validations coming from the wire. We have the state transition functions, and we have the committing to DB, but we don't have anything that has to do with like changing head.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I still have to do like, I mean, what I meant by beacon chain changes is like, all the changes to the existing data structures plus like the new data structures and like the block processing and state processing and that kind of stuff. But I don't have like, it's not all stitched together in a coherent way. Definitely needs
It seems that we are more or less in the same situation then, perhaps.
Okay.
There are a lot of validator changes as well. For example, you have a new PTC duty, which I think we finished that end to end, but we haven't done the proposer changes.
Okay. And how about other clients? Or are they around the same place, or is anyone ahead?
So for Teco, yeah, haven't been working on ePBS for the last week, but we had a decent progress with everything but fork choice. It was in a good stage, and now I'm rebasing the Luxes on top of the Luxes PR, which Potos mentioned, and yeah, that's a bit of a nightmare, as he said. So yeah, we'll probably spend some time on that, and then yeah, we still have to do the fork choice, which is the major change. So yeah, not sure. Yeah,
maybe a little further. Okay. Yeah, I was just curious. All right, cool. Let's see. I think that's
Justin, do you know how Tech was doing, or is the person that is the EPF here?
Well, so I don't know if they're here actually. I can scan the participants for a moment, and it doesn't look like it unless they're using a very different name, and they're not aliased to somebody I do know who they are. Otherwise, anyway, so I don't think they're here. So I guess I'll address this then, or I'll comment. Yeah, we're most of the way through. I would say the non-fork choice part of the beacon chain. I actually got a question from them, and I basically pointed to the comments in the Discord channel from Teku and you guys a couple weeks ago about, which it sounds like still broadly true, that fork choice seems to be not mostly broached yet, because that's what they were working at next. I have pointed to them, and please tell me if this was a reasonable or not thing. Things like the state or the block processing or the peer-to-peer interface. The idea is things which are maybe have some independence from fork choice. Now, as far as the Lucas's PR, we're sort of not as far enough along to be enormously hindered in a way. We actually have a slightly different issue with that PR, and I don't know. I'm actually, yeah, I think I'll make this a question. I'm curious what other people are doing with this, because this is something Nimbus doesn't. So Nimbus doesn't do feature branches very much. That's the brief background here. We kind of keep merging smallish, usually bits into our development branch all the time. So here, however, we have definitely a feature branch. but it's sort of falling. Well, the person doing it is in fact not rebasing or merging, which is, who knows? I'm leaving up to them for the moment. But is this something that people are doing in general? Is this something that the people's ePBS branches are they trying to include them in some development branch? Are they just leaving them kind of relatively stagnant from development, figuring that only update when truly necessary? Are they kind of rebasing habitually? Like what are the
For me, I mean, the branch is small enough that I've been rebasing, and like but like once you have enough PRs, that becomes like too painful, and I'd probably like merge into. But then with this recent change from Lucas, seeing as how it affects a lot of Electra, is my understanding. I think what I'll probably have to go do is implement this for Electra first, and then rebase my.
That's what we did. That's why I hadn't worked in Electra at all, except Lucas's PR that I implemented it just because I wanted to know how to rebase later.
Okay. Yeah. That's all right.
Having
Well,
said so, our development is probably very different than Nimbus. Like the reason it's presumably very reasonable, especially for us that we're kind of convinced that it should be included, that you could have this in develop as a future fork, and then it shouldn't affect at all your production code. The problem is that I'm never going to get this past Preston to merge it in Prism. So that's why we cannot go that way. But that way certainly would be the easiest one to maintain.
yeah, for sure.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is this thing that was just merged from Lucas? Is this for DevNet 4 then?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, because I was worried like that would be even worse if like, because I don't think we've done DevNet 4 yet, and if that would be hard to merge that into unstable, and then we'd have to have like a free this PR. I don't know. I'm just okay. It would be worse if we had to have like some intermediate step before this PR, and then I would have to like figure that out. But
All right, but I'm excited that people are actually advancing. If fork choice seems to be the problem for everyone, please ping me when you guys start implementing it, because that's certainly where the bad bugs are going to start appearing. If there's any attack on this, it's going to be on fork choice, I think.
yeah, I don't know that. The only reason I've not started it is because, I mean, for one, modularization, just one thing at a time, but the other is I generally haven't spent a lot of time modifying fork choice in Lighthouse, so like I have to wrap my head. I'll need to wrap my head around a lot of our specific implementation of fork choice and then modify it. So it's just been.
So fork choice is, I guess, one of the notable things with fork choice here is just one of the shared bits of infrastructure that. So this is one option, is to treat this as a complete fork, as it were, and we're not worried about mergeability, even eventually. And another, and in that case, that's easier in a way. Another is to care. But regardless of that, this fork choice, one of the notable things about it is exactly that it's one of the first times it interacts in a fairly intricate way with rest of the implementation. Networking doesn't. Most of the beacon chain stuff is new, etc. And it combines that with being, let's say, very nuanced or subtle security properties. I've probably done a little bit more work with our Nimbus's fork choice than it sounds like Mark has with over there, but not that much. And even then, I've seen. I mean, this is mostly an Eaton's thing, really, and like, but getting it's very easy to get it wrong with in subtle, hard to detect ways that unless they're tested for specifically, like all of the unit tests will pass and everything else will pass. It always makes me a little wary of changes, I guess.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Writing the 4-choice tests for this, if we ever decide to ship something like this, would be a nightmare. Like getting all branches tested on 4-choice and creating those test vectors is going to be a nightmare, and we need them. It's definitely the most subtle point. If I mean, there's some light in that Francesco is trying to work out a version of ePBS. It's very different. It's without BTC. It has many disadvantages that I can see, but a huge one is that it doesn't touch 4-choice. It just keeps 4-choice as it is today. So if that one works, we might want to shift. But it's just an early idea so far. All right, guys, it seems that we're more or less all of us on the same page. The withdrawals issue is not really an issue. I only see Gajinder with the mic open. I don't know if you wanted to say something, Gajinder.
Yep. Hey, Porus. So basically, in while we were putting up the post about split division of Spectra, we basically had a small discussion about ePBS because I was sort of pushing it to be included in Spectra B. So whatever is the name of whatever will be the name of the fork. But I think so there were a few questions that were asked, and I sort of want to bring them out in this form and sort of want to get your opinion. And the question was that right now in PBS we have two builders that are mostly making the block, but how will ePBS basically change that, in the sense that any builder can basically right now even go to Relay and start providing it payloads. So how does ePBS democratize it, in the sense that even if the builder, for example, has to still be a validator or put up a huge bond, which is basically held up in the beacon chain, then the problem is that it increases the barrier quite a bit to be a builder. And
I don't see what's the increase in so the fact that you have to have at least 16 ETH to stake.
Yep.
I don't see this as a big barrier. Like if anything, the current builders all have much more, and they will be staked anyways. So I don't see how can it be worse.
No, it's not gonna be worse. But the question is,
how do we make it better? So
yes,
yeah. So for it's unclear at all. I don't see ePBS in any way making a team that doesn't have the private order flow suddenly beat these builders that have the transactions that no one else sees. So I think it's going to be very hard that any player in any system that you can come up with will beat someone that has transactions that you don't have. So I think it's quite naive to think that that we're gonna ever be in a situation in which the transactions are all private and then suddenly out of like thin air we can beat them. However, what this does is that it raises the floor to be a safer, a more balanced auction. Prismatic Labs will just have a vanilla client posting bids. Any validator, any home staker can just set a flag on their own on their own home staking rig and just submit bids every slot. So that means that at the very least, builders will have to bid more than honest validators bidding. All of them, not just my own house, but all of them.
Right.
So I think this makes it more easier.
I basically gave arguments on the similar line that anyone would be able to be a builder, but again, the question arises that how would that person become effective against or become very competitive against the builders that are out there? And as you mentioned, the private order flow is one of the issues. But maybe I think what we can also do is not require builder to have 16 ETH staked. And when the builder is, for example, when anyone could be a builder, as long as their builder bid contains a transaction, which can basically be applied on the EL state, and
this is one way,
basically the
but
money can be deducted from the execution layer.
But this doesn't give any better status to a builder. So, and it makes it much more complicated to us. So what you're proposing is to make the payment up front on the EL, which is viable. We can do this. However, to make that payment, you still need to have that money locked up. You cannot come up with that money out of the block itself, which would be the dream situation for a searcher, soon to be builder. You find a block that is worth 45 ETH, you submit the bid for 45 ETH, and for say 44.9 ETH, and you include a transaction in the block that pays. However, that transaction needs to come with the money at the top of the state. So that means that you already needed to have this 44 ETH. You cannot produce 44 ETH in your block and pay, because we're nowhere near to having ZK proofs that you will pay in a block. So I think it doesn't solve the issue of having the money up front. Right, and it makes it incredibly more complicated for us to build, because it requires now the EL to be with us shipping this.
So bid is not going to be 44 ETH. Bid is going to be, most of the times in the 0.1 or 0.2 ETH kind of a range. But my thinking was that if, for example, I am a person who wants to not get my transaction sandwiched, so I'm thinking what kind of use cases can be solved with this. So for example, if I am a person who don't want his transaction to get sandwiched, so I can use my own beacon node to sort of transmit this bid, and if it's included, then obviously I can also transmit my payload. And when I'm doing the bid, I can use my local EL mempool to create a bundle with my transaction included, or it could just be that person's transaction, as long as obviously it's paying more to the proposer, it sort of gets accepted, and then I can get my my transaction included. And the point is that I don't have to be a builder in the sense of staking some ETH on Beacon Chain. And if it's open to everyone who can do it at any time, then I see, for example, many people or many whales at least using this particular feature to safeguard their transactions.
Sure. What you're describing is inherently better than forcing the builders to be staked, and it's inherently much more complicated. So enforcing the payment is something that is trivial in our design and is highly non-trivial in your design. It involves bringing 5 extra teams, having the logic, checking, synchronizing the CL with the EL in the fact that the payment was made, and so forth.
Yeah. So one way, it could be easy. For example, when the bid is applied, when the bid is received, so you send it to EL to sort of validate it, and if it gets applied, then you get a state root back on which you can further build, or so yeah, but it is a bit more complicated. But even if, for example, we leave this proposition, because that was something that came to my mind when I was trying to come up with the reasons why ePBS will make things better. So what are the other areas of impact that you think that ePBS will have? And I was also reading about execution tickets, and I think you might have mentioned it earlier. And at some point, we might need to do multiple proposals or execution tickets, and how all that will sort of fix into this puzzle. So if you can
This
sort
is
of
jumping all over
provide.
the place. So the one reason to push for ePBS perhaps in Fusaka would be because it solves all of the discussion that we're seeing today about blobs being included or not. It solves the latency problem on CPU, and it solves the bandwidth problem on stakers. Because, and this has nothing to do with ePBS itself, nor the auction mechanism. It's just the fact that you don't need to validate DA nor validate execution on the payload when you add test. So if you're a proposer, you're a home staker, today you need to get your blocks out and they need to be distributed to everyone in less than 2 seconds. On ePBS, they need to be distributed in less than 9 seconds. So that's the biggest impact. And we wouldn't be having this discussion of whether we need to increase the block the target for blocks or not, because bandwidth will not be an issue, or at least only average bandwidth would be an issue instead of peak bandwidth would be an issue. And the same for CPU. So those are impacts that ePBS has, regardless of market dynamics, nor MEV, nor anything like this. And I don't want to get into like the other.
So can we sort of quantify in some sense what the effect is gonna be, so that, I mean, for example, Lotsa team wants to know what is the net positive. Can we quantify what is the net positive effect of ePBS, and maybe write some article about it, unless it's already covered and I don't have it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat? I don't understand.
I mean, can we sort of articulate how impactful ePBS is, or how it's gonna impact and create a positive staking system, apart from the fact that, okay, we have, because blobs, again, when 98% of the blocks are through PBS, basically publishing blobs is not really an issue. But as you have said that, okay, it will also increase the window to import the blobs and to validate them. So that might be a positive benefit. So can we have an article that basically says that, or a document that says that?
We've produced like several documents like this. Terence has been doing like outreach. Essentially, all of my documents like point to this pipelining. We have like very precise numerology on how all of this changes. I've been tweeting about this for 2 years now. I think this is like, if it's, yeah, I don't know. I feel like this is highly documented already. Like in the EIP and in the PR, there are links to like very extensive documentation. That documentation includes this.
I do believe that you have a ton of documentation. I feel that in some sense there's so much that it's a bit overwhelming.
Okay, in the next 10 minutes, I'll post a HackMD with the pipelining of what you get. 10 minutes after this meeting is done, I'll post a HackMD.
I do think that a bullet pointed list that someone like a very quick overview of the benefits of PBS would be really good at getting buy-in, and like not a deep dive technical, but like,
yeah,
there are those too.
Terence
has posted several of those.
It doesn't have to be technical. Something like Verkle.info, like we have for Verkle, are basically a site, or maybe wherever we choose to put it. It just basically documents all that stuff. And okay, I'll also sort of go through what is out there and see, because I was trying to explain the benefits of ePBS over what currently is scenario, and realistically, I couldn't figure out how we can democratize the builder set.
I think so. They're again, we're probably going in circles, but what ePBS allows is to anyone that has the money to become a builder, instead of like asking for permission from a relay. That's the only thing, and it might be zero today because relays are allowing anyone to build. So this is not relays are not gatekeeping builders. So it's not a real change, and I very much doubt that we will ever have any system that makes people win on the public mempool versus people that have the private order flows. And I am not aiming to change that at all.
So it is some sort of protection against monopoly of the relayers is the best argument that is out there.
It is allowing someone to not have to trust an external player. This is not something that we have the capacity today. If you want to construct with an external builder, you need to trust someone. And that's all that we're changing on the auction. And then there's a lot of benefits that come from the pipeline.
Okay, so I mean, maybe we can also lower the threshold for a builder, and if the builder has some particular ETH threshold, then I mean,
you can't, because if let's say that you have validators that have 1 ETH, then you open the beacon chain for a DOS. That's the reason why validators can only start with 32 ETH. We cannot handle if we get like 1 million deposits of 1 ETH.
right.
But also, I believe that it's not an issue. Like having the builders being staked is not really an issue. If you like very small builders can still go through a relay. Like if you see someone that is not a competitive builder,
right,
still
right.
go
So
through a relay.
I basically don't see current builder set or somebody who is serious about building not putting up 16 ETH. I mean, at least not at these prices. That is not an issue, but it could be issue if prices explode, or there are people who don't want to trust any builder to give their private transaction to, so that it gets sandwiched. So in that sense, that was my earlier thinking, in which the bid itself could be checked and deducted from execution layer before it's confirmed to be part of the beacon block, and the right is given to that particular builder to produce the block. But yeah, I understand what you're saying.
I I actually feel like perhaps what's the meta discussion here is we might benefit from a different meeting with you, POTUS, to like pick your brain about a lot of PBS stuff. It doesn't need to be like I don't know, an office hour on PPS, because you've done so much work, understanding this, and yeah, it just like I feel like a lot of catch up could be done, and I do agree that the wider community is less informed about this for sure. And the only reason I I mean, I specifically dug into PBS myself and brought that to Sigma Prime a while ago, which is why I know even as much as I do. But And that was several hours of research that other, clients haven't done, and even I'm behind on a lot of the things. So I don't know. We could use time even digesting some of the research and picking your brain on stuff. Is my thought.
I'm happy to talk in how much time you guys want. Any day you can just ping me on ePBS, on the ePBS channel. I'm the most invested, Terence as well, on shipping something like this. So I'm happy to talk as much as you want.
I mean, as I sort of mentioned on chat, that low latency is a good thing, and I mean, trust is definitely good. But if if we think in terms of low latency, and that effect could be multiplied if we sort of have slot auctions than block auctions.
Yeah, unless you guys know how to solve the problem that Julian wrote, I don't know how to. I don't know how to solve that.
I mean, because the problem that Julian had said last time was, correct me if I'm wrong, but slot auctions just seem much more likely to create a secondary market and people to go around enshrined PBS system and do off-chain relays and things like that.
Yeah.
That was a pretty clear.
Yeah, the relay is going to be the builder, and it's going to be one person winning every slot.
Yeah, and then, but we have a DA problem with block auctions still.
Yes, that we need to think about, and we need to gauge whether or not it's dangerous.
And I think one of the directions that we thought of to maybe head that off was like adjusting the penalties so that they're not linked. I forgot exactly what it was. It was something along the lines of like.
Yeah, so we could slash for an invalid payload that has the right hash. We could charge right there on inclusion. We can charge the builder. But it adds complication. It's easy to implement, but it adds complication. That's why I would rather certainly not do it at this stage where we're talking about like an early implementation.
Right. Yeah, and I guess to Dustin's point about how much is getting merged in, since we're talking about early implementation, like I have been treating the Lighthouse implementation as more or less prototype code. Like it's not terrible code, but it's not like I expect to have whatever final implementation to be a complete rewrite, but having gained the experience of how to implement it through this. But yeah.
So I basically could not understand why slot auctions have that problem of secondary market. But yeah, I'll go through it and maybe come back, because I think if we can substantially change the latency game or the time that builder has to build the blocks, then it would be pretty nice direct benefit that can be easily explained, that okay, it is making the entire blockchain economically efficient. So I think we should try to see, and I'll try to understand what the issue is with the slot auctions.
The issue is very simple, is that in these delayed auctions, it's been measured that you get higher bids for just in time than a bid of what the value of the block will be 6 seconds from now. Because whomever is bidding is going to discount from that bid the risk of the market going against in the next 6 seconds. So that means that for the validator, the rational decision would be to never auction now, but rather defer the auction to 6 seconds from now. And the way to do this is to sign the block with the relays address, and then the relay runs the auction 6 seconds from now in the future, the relay pays you off market, off chain. Or I'm not off chain, I'm sorry, off product. And it's hard to argue against that.
Yeah, one of the other things that came up though that Gajendra brought up was having I believe what you were talking about earlier was having the payment basically not be, or like the stake being in the execution layer rather than the beacon chain.
Yeah, this is certainly implementable, and we can iterate over this. We could easily iterate over this, but this adds a lot of complexity. It adds complexity on reorgs. It adds complexity on fork choice. I have thought about it, and it's much more complex, and it gives very little benefits, I claim, because it's unlikely that small builders will ever win, like small builders, like occasional builders that are not able to stake 16 ETH in any reasonable manner. And at any chance, in any case, there's a market for that. You can still go through a relay.
Oh yeah, I guess I thought there were benefits besides small stakers that design would have accrued, but
it opens also it opens complexity at every level. Like currently, it's already a DOS for us, the fact that any validator can send a bid. If we open it to anyone with an ETH account being able to send a bid, it's a different order of magnitude.
Oh yeah. So yeah, actually that was something. Is that how we handle like bid DOSing on the P2P layer right now? Is via you having to be staked?
Well, that's part of it, but still, remember that when we went to Capella, we were worried that we were going to be DOSed by BLS to exec changes, right? So we still need to heavily stop bidding. Like you can only, for example, you can forward only bids that are higher or like the top 2 bids that you receive.
Yeah, I mean, because that is another layer of complexity is how you deal with spamming the bid topic on Gossip, because I had once there was a proposal for, what is it called? There's different kinds of relays. It was like the V3 version of the optimistic relay where it was basically PBS, but you had a relay just to enforce the payment, but everything else took place. Like it was something for us to field test ePBS, I guess. That was the topic that I looked at, is how to prevent like spamming. And the way that I had done it at the time was like basically you already had to have won a couple of bids via the off-chain mechanism, via like relays and stuff, in order for the beacon chain to recognize the pub key of the builder and then to Gossip bids. And that basically you have this kind of rolling window of like people that have won X amount of blocks can push bids. But with ePBS, you can't really do that. You can do people that are staked, but it seems like it would be relatively cheap to continuously. I mean, if all you got to do is put up 16 ETH and then you can just spam the P2P layer with bids that aren't going to win or something along those lines. Like I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, the complexity of allowing bids from anyone that is not staked, as Gajendra
Oh, I
suggested.
mean, even with staked, even with
Oh,
staked.
even with state, we can heavily stop it by just saying we're only going to gossip one bid from each validator max and only the top bid that we receive. So you need to bid more than the current bid if you want to gossip it. So it's easy for us to stop it on the state side, on the CL P2P. But if it's open to everyone, then the point of transactions DOS handling is that once you have a valid signature that I've checked, then I have you. If this transaction gets included and I can include it, you will pay gas for it. And that's the assurance that you have that verifying the transaction is cheaper than the gas that you would pay for it. Otherwise, we will be broken. And this doesn't hold in Gajinder's approach.
Like the only thing is, like, right now with the current relay approach, there's tons and tons and tons of bids, and which, like, you would have to change the setup. So you basically you wait until just before, if you're a builder, you wait until just before the slot, and then you gossip only your best bid for that slot, which
no, but actually that actually is solved by the current design of ePBS. So the reason currently there's a lot of bids is because the relay has a push mechanism instead of a pull one. That's a side of one, but the reason is because builders continually push bids to the relay because they don't know when the proposer will request them, and they need to cancel bids because the market was against them or whatever it is. This is no longer necessary for builders because the proposer would only ask once or whenever they want to ask, and then the builder decides if they want to serve or not.
The proposer, if they're doing the P2P layer, the proposer doesn't ask.
Yeah, but the P2P layer is kind of irrelevant for ePBS. The P2P layer is only there as a safeguard to keep the lowest bid possible. The P2P layer will never win an auction in real life.
Okay. I mean, if that's the logic, that makes sense. But so you're saying that basically a rational builder, what they can do is, like, wait until some X amount of time before the slot, gossip their bid just to ensure it gets there, but then they still maintain a public endpoint.
No, not even that. They don't gossip anything. They don't want to gossip anything because if they gossip anything, that can be included. A serious builder will never gossip anything on the P2P side stack and will only wait for the proposer to request.
Okay. I mean, what I was thinking that they would do is that they would gossip, but then you would maintain the ability to, like, hit their endpoint and potentially get something better because you have a lower latency. But I don't understand if they don't gossip at all. I don't understand why we even have a P2P layer.
Well, because I will gossip. I will not open an endpoint. Like I am just a home staker, and we want to keep the lowest. We want to keep liveness on the network. So a few people that are altruistic will be just gossiping bits every now and then. You just run your Lighthouse node has a flag that says on top of validating, submit a payload every epoch. Submit a bid every epoch. It's cheap for you. It's free. You're just only going to stress your EL for like 12 seconds an epoch, and you keep liveness and you keep the floor of the auction.
I see.
Definitely, Prismatic Labs will run a builder.
And your thought is that a serious builder isn't going to gossip because they'd be telling the other builders what their bid is and stuff like that, or
Well, also because it's a matter of timing, right? So the gossip on the P2P layer needs to go 3 seconds essentially before the actual bid that wins the auction will happen, right? The bid that wins the auction is going to happen at around 2 seconds into the slot, and the bid to be on the P2P stack needs to be at least 1 second before the slot. In those 3 seconds, the whole market can go against them. No serious builder would commit to a payload that can be included 3 seconds before the payload actually needs the auction actually happens.
So they would, or at least they would definitely not include any SexX arbitrage transactions, which are huge.
Yeah, so they cannot cancel a P2P bid,
I know
but they
that.
can cancel their own bids.
Yeah. They can't cancel. Yeah. So, right. So basically, like if the builder was even to participate, they would basically not include any of those arbitrage transactions, which would make it much less competitive, in addition to also having a second or so less time than. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. I mean, they could still do it, but it would be extra work for them, and there's not much point. I mean, yeah, especially with block auctions. Maybe that's
Yeah,
one of
definitely block auctions.
that. I mean, that might be one other argument for slot auctions is that slot auctions, like presumably all of these arbitrage issues would be rolled into the cake with their pricing, and the P2P layer could be more heavily used, but.
I was thinking one thing. So why do you think that a builder won't try to send the bid over the P2P and just wait the proposer? I'm thinking that maybe the proposer is not connected to the particular builder, and that builder that is not being contacted says, "Hey, I have something better, and I think I will beat the one that the proposer actually contacted. So I wanna signal to that proposer, hey, I have something better." Why this is not applying?
Yeah, so yeah, this was discussed actually in Kenya. So we should include a contract or some way on chain for builders to register. That you just submit a transaction saying this is my endpoint, and then clients can just grab the list of builders from that contract.
Yeah, I see, but maybe
But no,
because
I understand your point, and I agree. Like a builder that is not popular will use the P2P stack.
yeah, let's say it's something that is someone that is censoring like hell, and half of the proposer don't want to do that, but then he wants to say, hey, this is my candy. Are you sure you want to pick this?
No, I agree that the P2P stack might be useful for certain cases, but realistically, like all of our blocks are being built by two builders. Those two builders are going to continue whatever system we design.
Yeah, that's
And
it.
those two builders will have open endpoints.
So the concern was that an unscrupulous builder would put high bids on the P2P layer and then win auctions. Is that I didn't quite understand. I guess I didn't see a difference. If I understood that correctly, I didn't see a difference between the P2P versus the RPC layer. Because I mean, presumably we could implement like something where you have a blacklist for pub keys for the builder, and then
that would definitely, we will definitely automatically blacklist builders that satisfy some criteria. That's one of the big advantages of ePBS. The validators can blacklist builders instead of relays. But I think Enrico has a point, which is there are some builders that are not known. They're not being contacted by validators. Those builders are kind of forced in the P2P stack.
oh, that was the point. The point is if their endpoint isn't well known, then the only way they can get attention is using the P2P layer.
Yeah, well known or well known, but normally not used because of some social stuff. But they still want to say, hey, I have something, and the way to contact proposer is via P2P layer.
Yeah, and I don't see that as a concern, though. I don't see that as an
No,
attack.
it was not as a concern. It was a comment on POTUS saying that a builder will never send a bid over P2P normally, and I see instead there are some cases where maybe he wants to.
Yeah. Yeah, and certainly like a register of endpoints. I don't know. That feels like something that would be handled off chain the way it is now. But one thing that isn't done now that is like the nice thing about the P2P layer is that it's just automatic. Like you'll just automatically get, like, even if there's a builder you've never heard of, if they have a good bid, you would just be able to get access to that bid. Whereas like right now you have to like manually keep checking the ETH stakers GitHub list of URLs and adding them to your.
Yeah. Or what if a bit contains also the endpoint?
Yeah, well, to have it on chain, that would be, but in theory, I would think you would have a separate gossip topic for that, because otherwise you have to have an extra data field in the bid, and then using up these bytes that are almost always not known. But if there was a different gossip topic for builders to broadcast their endpoints that wasn't included on chain, and you could verify their collateral balance easily, and then limit them to like once per epoch or something for spam prevention, then that would be good. But
All right, guys, we're already over time. I asked in the chat, I don't know if there's anyone that has any concern or implementation questions or something that is not related to the auction itself. So we can probably allow Pooja to finish the recording and and go home and call it for the next 2 weeks. I will hopefully I'm still aiming to have this working by DevCon. So, and then next meeting that we'll have, it's going to be like fairly close. So in like 2 or 3 meetings, I'm hoping that we have already fork choice working and at least a one client intro running. All right, I promised I'll post this one bulleted list of things, and I'll post it in the next 10 to 15 minutes. All right, guys.
Okay. See ya. Bye.
See you next time.
Bye.
Thank you.
thanks, bye.